parenting, manliness, marriage, fitness, and finance. Nothing's off limits, and we try to address it all with candor and a little bit of humor.
Man, so I don't know about you, my brain was cooking last week after we finished up the show and we were talking about, masculinity. I think we were really kind of shotgun blast about it. We really went everywhere. We kind of covered a little ground here, a little ground there. We threw a ton of stuff out, and all of it just got my brain kind of moving on, like, well, what does it mean? What is it really trying to understand? Like, what is masculinity? Because you start trying to, parse it out and get facets of what it is to try to get a better look. And to me, we talked about aggression. We talked about this kind of drive to protect. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff. But to me, the first thing that leapt out to me was like just self-reliance and accountability. Like, I don't know why, but those are the ones that my brain settled on by Monday morning, and I was just chewing on all week. But where'd your brain go after the show, man?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I thought we should try to explore it in greater detail and figure it out. And I think I went to the the yin yang symbol, right? Like I think it's called a taijitu, just that symbol of the yin yang, right? And that is trying to convey that there's a spectrum of things. Things bleed into each other. It's fluid. It's not fixed, but there are differences that act. They can act harmoniously or they can act in conflict, and the goal is for them to act harmoniously.
So you're talking about more the balance of the male and the female than you are about like male internal, yeah? Is that where you're going with that?
So I think I like to use that symbol as like the base plate because it's like you can see there's elements of both in both, right? So there's masculine in the feminine, there's feminine in the masculine. So it's a mixture. It's not this like black or white, dichotomy that you see in other places. So, because to your point about self-reliance, like of course, like women, girls can be self-reliant, but like there's we kind of we want men to kind of take accountability and stewardship, and some of that is through relying on themselves, not other systems.
No, and that's an important point. I mean, because what you're saying, I mean, this is just like a 2025 mandatory caveat kind of thing, but I think what you're saying is what I've been thinking too. Like I was talking to my wife over coffee about this, and she's like, "Women are self-reliant." Like, yeah, I know that's. We're not trying to define it as a contrast between the two necessarily. We're not saying this is what men are and this is not what women are. We're trying to, I think, capture like the ideal masculine person. Like, I mean, again, I'm a father, you're a father. We're trying to raise boys. We're trying to look around society and figure out like, well, what are the things we would want to really, encourage in men and want them to be like? What do I want to be in myself? Like, these are the attributes that I push for in myself to try and develop. And so it's not to say one and not the other. And I think honestly, to me, I'm not really talking at this point about the feminine too much at all. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying about the balance and the need to have a balance in a person, because certainly there are feminine attributes in all of us. But really, I'm just kind of sidelining it. I don't want to get into the business of saying, well, this is one and we're this and they're not that. Like, it doesn't seem to me useful.
Yes, and so I think what I want to ground it with is humans are messy. Like we are not like there's no like clear lines with humans, and so with that, there's a spectrum of attributes and traits that come out in different ways. So this morning, I was braiding my daughter's hair. Like that's totally like a normal thing. Like I think that's a total like a dude can braid hair and a woman can braid hair.
Vikings,
Yeah.
Vikings, Adam, they braided hair,
So
like,
all
and
right. So
beards.
yes, that's true. So let me read the Robert Heinlein quote real quick, and then we can kind of like discuss
Hmm.
where that goes, right? So Robert Heinlein is classic science fiction author. Went to the Naval Academy, wrote a bunch of great books. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. But this quote comes from a book called Time Enough for Love, and he says a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balancing accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects.
Okay. I'm a Heinlein fan. I didn't know he was a graduate of the Naval Academy, but we won't hold that against him. So here, as a non-Navy guy, help me out with this. Con a ship. When I hear con a ship, I think walk up to the ship and
Right.
sweet talk my way onto it
So,
without paying.
yeah, apologies. That's some naval industry jargon that comes in, right? So, to con, the verb to con, CONN, is to kind of you're taking navigational control of that ship, and you are in charge of maneuvering that ship safely and effectively, so you don't have collisions, and you kind of get to where you're going.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess I'm a no go on that one. Like, if you don't know what the word means, it's probably unlikely you could do it. I feel confident that I cannot navigate a ship without hitting obstacles. Like I'm like 90% confident that I can't do that.
You
Yeah,
can do
nothing
it.
bigger than a John boat.
You
All right,
can
maybe you're
figure
right.
it out. You just look at
But
the lights, and you like look around. You'll figure it out.
exactly, have a few beers.
Yeah.
It takes the edge off. You know, you
Yeah,
make the best
it
decisions when
really
you're a little
kind of
relaxed.
drop into a good state. Absolutely.
But all jokes aside, I mean, what he's talking about really is kind of a relook at the concept of the Renaissance man, right? Like the Renaissance person, I guess. But we're talking about dudes, so I'll say man. This idea that you should be able to do a little of everything. But to me, that's I guess what I picture when I picture self-reliance is I picture that, right? To me, when I picture one of the most manly dudes that I know, it's my dad. Maybe that's normal for all of us. We all kind of picture our dads, I think, in that role. My dad's not a big dude. He's not a UFC fighter. He's not a SF guy. He sells auto parts, but the man can fix anything. And he's just totally confident in his ability to do it. He doesn't even need YouTube, which is where he totally beats the crap out of me because, man, the first thing I got to do when I fix a thing is go YouTube it and figure out, all right, water heater. What am I not thinking of when I got to replace this guy? He just knows how to fix his water heater, knows how to treat termites in the walls. He knows how to repair a jet ski, like all this stuff. He can just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that kind of self-reliance, that kind of like, oh yeah, I can handle this situation is like the backbone of really positive masculinity. Like the combination of confidence and capability to at least like get a good solid start and handle a situation. I mean, what do you think?
So yeah, so I think so the elephant like hanging over this discussion is the idea that there are no differences between men and women, that we're all blank slates, that all this is culturally, socially constructed by the education system and these historical structures, right? And there is some validity to that. Like there is some of that is culturally, socially constructed. However, I think what you and I are trying to say is there are differences, and they start at the biological level, and then they kind of ripple through to the conduct. So the the biological fact is that men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women. Like that's just a thing that comes out of our biological, our biological legacy from just growing up, right? So with that, yes, so then like what kind of derives from that, and I think when you're talking about the self-reliance, I think about serving, like this idea of like kind of just being of service to your family, your tribe, your kin group. So there's a need to kind of serve and kind of provide value to that group, and I think that's where however you're doing it, like there's a million ways for a man to do that, but like you're kind of showing up, you're taking accountability, you're like, okay, this is a problem, like I need to address this forcibly, and then you get to the generalities, right? Like in general, men are interested in like things, and then women are interested in relationships, that kind of generality, and there's obviously like lots of exceptions to that, but like in general. So I think that gets to your point about like being able to do all these things with things, is that like interest and like and getting that done and then providing value to your group.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a good way to capture it. Like the things focused maybe is what kind of drives that. Like I don't know. I'm not deep enough on probably the why to some of that to understand the kind of why it's like that. But yeah, to your point, I guess I guess it's such a basic, obvious observation that I don't feel the need to spend a lot of time defending it. Like men and women are different. Like I don't. It's just so obvious in every interaction that I have, and every piece of culture that we have. Like it just screams everywhere, from like the way comedy is written to the stories that you see, the stories that appeal, like the basic Google data on, what percentage of this sort of book are written by this one. I mean, I don't think, generally speaking, the romance novel is marketing to women, and I don't think that surprises anyone. And nobody, I think, finds that shock. Like, oh my gosh, you mean it's not an even split? But it's because of the way that. I mean, I guess I don't know the why on how you display it deeply, except that obviously it's that way. It's probably that way because there's some kind of difference, and I don't think it's as simple as enculturation. So I guess one data point I'd provide on that is that, as you know, I'm raising 5 kids, 4 boys and a girl. We've talked that, but the differences between them and the way they respond to stimuli are just different, and it's apparent. But also, it's apparent that my ability to impact what they are is relatively limited. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like my kids mostly arrived on the planet about 70% complete with personality, basic attributes, likes, dislikes. Like, are they, gregarious? Are they kind of sour? Are they stubborn? Are they easygoing? Are they really physically active? Or are they kind of on the sluggish side? Like, all of that, I don't feel that I've influenced all that much, except around the margins, right? I mean, I can teach them to keep their elbows off the table. We can encourage reading instead of television watching. We can shape it a little bit, but the raw material is what it is, and it feels to me like that material is different from boy to girl.
Yes, and yeah, and this is like, this is the classic conversation you could have over drinks of different strengths as to like nature and nurture, right? Like what's the thing, right? And so I'm definitely, being on this journey raising 3 kids, I'm definitely on board with what you just said, that like most of that stuff is like innate. Like, you can kind of look at a kid and be like, why did you do that? And it's like it's in their nature, like to do that. So yes, that being said, like that doesn't absolve us of like our role as parents to kind of like shepherd them to develop, to like kind of grow into who they're going to be. There was I just read I read a book for my PhD that was like about treating your children as if they're like kind of honored guests in your house until it's time for them to leave. And it was this idea of like, you're just helping them. Oh, okay. Like, what are you into? What do you feel like doing? And you're trying to like, help them cultivate towards their natural inclinations. And yes, you still have to kind of guide them and be like, yes, no, you have to eat your broccoli before you get dessert. But like, but yes, most of that stuff is kind of baked in to their, comes when the operating system's in there when they come onto the planet.
Yeah, you're right. They're either Windows or Apple, just straight off the bat, and you get a few like Linux in there. You're like, all right, Linux, why don't you play with anybody else? Like, we got one Linux. We got one Linux. But it's funny that quote that you just said, treat them like honored guests until you leave your home. I could not disagree with that more. Like, one, if any guest came to my house and was like, you're going to go to bed at 8, you're going to wake up at 6:30, you're going to go rake these leaves, I'm not going to give you any money, you're going to eat what I tell you because you don't know what to eat. Like, anybody that came to my house, like, if you come visit, you're like, that's not what the experience will be like.
Here's your itinerary for tomorrow. Yeah.
All right, putting you 2 to a room, you're going to get in there, you're going to just share this room, and you're going to call me when you go to the bathroom so I can make sure you don't make a mess in there. Like, that will not be your guest experience if you come stay with us, Adam. I just want you to know. Like,
you're going to get a 1-star Yelp review. All right.
So I think those quotes, one of the funny things to me about those quotes is we've talked generation theory before. I'm sure we'll talk it a lot, but I think they're always responding to the time in which they're written. And so what I mean by that is, hey, treat them like honored guests. I think if parents are in a place where you're really kind of free range kidding, you're not really worried about them, or straight up children are just undervalued. Like, there are cycles when kids are just not a thing anybody appreciates, right? You get Oliver Twist, right? Classic Dickinsonian England, where like kids are just this awful refuse around the edge of society and all his stories. Like, maybe that feedback's really positive, but kind of coming off a guy who was a parent through like the O's, where basically every child is kind of this thing to be worshipped and idolized and like protected and cellophane wrapped and like provided experience. And you're like, look, that needs to be moderated too, right? You can love your kids and you can take care of your kids, but taking the honored guest thing a little too far creates the kind of entitled little disasters that like I don't want that to be in my house and I don't want that to be in the world. I think people need to understand that yeah, you're important, but also you're not the center of the universe. Like you are one of many people, and it's important to kind of temper both sides of that. So I think to kind of hit that medium.
Yeah, but I think I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think what it's getting at is like, if I'm at your house, um, you know, I'm gonna go kind of execute my game plan, like do my daily work. And I'm gonna be like, we're gonna be respectful. We're gonna have like an exchange, and then you're gonna kind of like facilitate. Oh, hey, Adam, what do you need? Oh, you need internet connection. You need this. Like, you're gonna kind of help me get to where I'm going. And I think that's the idea. Is like, these children come to us and they're already like, they have like, hey, they have an idea like how they want to follow their life to kind of achieve, find their thing that they're going to contribute to the world, right? And we are going to kind of help them discover that. Like, okay, let's try some different sports. Okay, you don't like that sport? Let's try this. What do you think about this? Let's try these extracurricular activities. Let's expose you to various things to try to help you like figure out what resonates with you individually. So I think that was kind of the intent of the honored guest thing. But
No, you're right. I'm sure. I mean, again, I haven't read it, so I'm just looking at the title. But to me, what you're describing is like being a good parent, right? Being a good parent, because while we say that the kids do have a core of kind of unchangeable material, and I think we all do. We all kind of have our, our character sheet, if you want to call it that, of just like basic attributes, and those aren't going to change too much. We can be our best or our worst selves. And my hope as a parent, and my hope as a human, like looking at myself, is that I could take myself up 20% or down 20%. And so let's say that I started at 60%. I think maybe 60. Let's say I started at 60. I could get up to 80 someday, and that's pretty good. That's a solid B. Or I could probably get down to 40 and be just like one of the kind of tricks of society that's really making the world a worse place. So I think my kids are the same, right? I think let's take honored guest off the table, but part of being a parent is really helping your kids be your best self. And honestly, that's really what we're mostly talking about, right? Is how do you make, people into our best selves? How do we become the best version of us that we can be?
yes, and so there are, there's healthy things we can do, and there's things that are not as healthy, right? And so with masculinity and
A
femininity,
lot of words you could use.
like
A lot of words you
there's
could use. Yeah.
like there's healthy manifestations of masculinity, and then there's unhealthy ones, right? So that's like the toxic, heroic.
Hmm.
We don't we want to get away from binaries. Like there's a spectrum here, but like that's I totally agree. Like we're trying to like, what is the best version that we can kind of summon into the world and help cultivate.
So that I feel like that last few minutes of conversation kind of refined a lot of what we were trying to talk about last week, and then we were kind of just scattering and going all over with. But that, if you wanted to tighten it down, is really what we're talking about. Like that's when we're talking about a discussion of what is positive masculinity, what are we trying to accomplish in the world. That's what it is, right? It's taking those attributes, it's sussing out the toxic and the bad, and really taking control of the positive, and trying to reinforce that so that we, as in me and you, and all the kids that we raise and the people that we encounter in the world, can all try to be a little better versions of ourselves. But that's good. That's good because I felt like last week we were definitely hopping all over the place, and so it's good to kind of just wicker that down a little tighter to really get a clear shot group what we're trying to aim at here. But but let's take that and let's apply that model to a shot group. Man, just can't get out of you can't take the army out of you just can't stop
industry jargon.
It's 22 years, I mean, you just can't not talk like that all the way.
I know.
But
You just fall
honestly,
into it. It's just like second language.
it's true. It's muscle memory of the mouth, right? It's just like there's a lot of other muscle memory of the mouth that I really, as a parent, try to suss out of my daily lingo. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll be on the phone with like an old friend,
Yeah.
and my daughter's 16 now. She'll be like, "Dad, you should probably have that conversation outside." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "You're slipping into army talk." Like, oh.
Yes.
Oh, the bad side of army talk. Like, a
Yeah.
little too much profanity for the house. Like, we
Yes.
got to go outside. Like, oh, yes. There's nothing like being a private in the army to develop
Well, yeah.
just a mean potty mouth, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, it's the Navy. It's like cuss like a sailor. The Navy has a long tradition of profanity. So, I will kind of say that sometimes. I do think my kids may learn more profanity from my wife, like driving in traffic. But I contribute as well. So, but I just tell her, I'm like, listen, hey, we're a Navy family. Like, this is just kind of like, it's part
it's
of
our culture.
Yeah,
It's
part of the
it's
thing.
who we are.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
Oh my gosh, I hope. Yeah, well, they unfortunately kids do pick up a lot more from what we don't intend to teach them than what we do. I
Yeah.
sometimes think I'm like, yeah, I wish you'd listen to me more and watch me less.
Yes, they're definitely watching more at 100%.
Always,
Absolutely.
always, and they sniff out hypocrisy so fast. Like it is amazing. Like, hey, double standard, Dad. Like, God, yeah, okay. And you know what? We've just accepted in my house that a double standard is acceptable. Like, well, when you pay the rent and when you own the house, you can set the standard the way you want. Like that's just unfortunately the rules of the house, and you just have to accept that.
That's true. That's true. There's always an alternative.
Maybe that's the negative side of masculinity. Maybe that
Yes,
is the
that's
tyrannical,
yeah.
like double
Well,
standards are
no,
fine.
and
Like
that's
this is
so
this is me like my a
no,
bad person.
and that's a great because I wanted to go back to the yin yang and kind of like why I like it so much is like it's showing you these different kind of traits, propensities, attributes that are on, the yin is probably or is associated with the feminine, with night, with some passivity, receptivity, with what else? Like the trough of a wave, shadows, and so there's that, and then there's the yang, which is more like the masculine, the daytime, expanding, what else? Growing, doing stuff, and then so the yang is order, so the man is order, and then the yin is feminine and a little bit more chaos, and so that chaos can be positive, right? It can be generative or it can be anarchy. Just like for the man, the yang can be stability or like tyranny, right? So like that's kind of the juxtaposition there, and you see that through like mythology, all throughout history. Those two kind of concepts playing together, and we want to be, the complexity in the middle, right? Like we want to find the Goldilocks meal, the porridge in the middle. That's like a little bit of yin, a little bit of yang, but like we have to understand that those tendencies are there, and then we want to try to cultivate the positive manifestations of those.
No, you're 100% right. You're yes. I should probably get smarter on like since we were using this analogy, it's actually baked into our show graphic. I should probably get smarter on like the kind of detailed look at the yin yang and like the details of what it means. But to me, even just at its basic level, this kind of clash but also merging of the two sets of attributes is just visually super appealing, and it really captures, I think, really what we're talking about, right? Because that is what we're striving for in humanity, but also as individuals. Because, like you said, it's got that little chunk of each side has a little chunk of the other in the middle of it. Although in ours it's weird because like the seals have a chunk of green beret in them, and the green berets have a chunk of
Mm,
seal. Like we all have a little
mm,
seal in us somewhere. Like I don't
mm.
know where we go with that. I just thought of that
There's
when we were talking
there's
now.
so
Like
many directions we can take that.
I
Definitely,
don't even know what that means.
definitely.
Uh, but we'll just table that one for now.
Yes.
But that balance is what we're talking about. That balance is the striving, and yeah, I trying to figure out like how to do that, how to apply it is the challenge. Now it's funny you mentioned Goldilocks, right? And finding the porch. I don't know. In my family, Goldilocks ends very differently. So I read to my kids, right, a lot, and so all the way until they're, let's say 7 or 8, they just assume that what I'm reading, like one, the Giving Tree ends like 6 pages early. Like I don't read the end of that book. It's like the worst ending to a book in history. Like now the tree and the boy live happily ever after. Let's not sweat it. We're not going to talk about exploitation of the tree. But also Goldilocks, like she gets eaten. In
Mm.
every book, like, yep, she gets eaten by them bears. It was rough. She probably shouldn't have broken into their house and stolen things. It's so don't do that, or bears will eat you. And the kids are like, bears will eat me. I hope that that's the message they take away. I don't like the idea that she gets away at the end of the story.
All right, so we could say golden mean. We'll say like Aristotelian golden mean. We'll use
Better than
that instead.
Goldilocks. Better than, and you get
But
the whole new Puss in Boots show with like the different Goldilocks Three Bears take, which is pretty good actually.
yeah,
I like the new Puss in Boots movie, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
yeah. So my daughter, like when I put her to bed now, the 4-year-old will say, "Tell me a story from your mind." So I like have to
Whoa,
make up a story, and I've gotten a little. It got a little too scary a couple stories, so she definitely I had to like back it down.
your
She was not
your mind's in
feeling
a
it.
dark. It's a dark
Yeah,
mind, Daddy. Like you brought out the monsters. Put
yeah,
them back in there.
yeah.
You're like an '80s scary movie.
Yeah,
Oh
she wanted a
man.
little happily ever after in there.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people want a little happily ever after. It's funny. It's movies and media exposure and children is hilarious. I mean, we were on a total tangent here. It doesn't really matter. But movies and media exposure and like what kids we were allowed to watch, what movies we were allowed to watch at what ages
Mm-hmm.
is so wildly different between when we were kids now and when we
Oh
were
yeah.
or when they are kids now and we were kids. Like when I was a kid, Nightmare on Elm Street was a reasonable movie for
Yeah.
elementary school children to watch and
Yeah.
discuss. And all I can think is like, did you guys never want your children to sleep again? Like,
Well, yeah.
do you hate children sleeping? Like,
So
what was the drive
and
there?
so my wife was like the youngest. She was in like a blended household of like two older siblings from like a different marriage, and then her and her sister. So she was the youngest, and so they'd watch like what the mass of people wanted to watch. So
Hmm.
but yeah, they watched Nightmare on Elm Street when she was
She
like,
plays up.
she was like 6 or 7, and they're like
You're like,
watching. She's just like, what were they thinking? Like, why was this like, okay, this is a cool thing to do, like, and even
I
like,
don't think I could sleep till I was like 10. Like, it was like
yeah,
10 before I could fall asleep, not convinced that I might die before I woke up. Like,
even like the never ending story, like when the horse like is in the quicksand, I'm like, dude, this like we were putting some like legit
it's
stuff
heavy.
on kids back then.
But every kid remembers these scenes, right? You're like, yes, when Artex the horse dies in the swamp, that stuff is like, that's some serious, like, heartrending stuff when you're 10.
Yeah.
And it's funny, mostly we watch that movie every once in a while, and my kids are like, what's wrong with that dog dragon thing, Dad? It looks like a Muppet. Like, yeah, just shut up. You know what? You just
Stole
don't
it.
appreciate this.
This was
Just
state of
squint
the
your
art back
eyes.
then.
All right, this is the opposite of high res TV. You need to squint. You need to look at it through like a piece of silk or something, and then it's gonna look exactly like it does in my imagination.
Yes, 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 yes.
But man, all of our movies now are defined by, at least in our house, our movies are mostly defined around what the kids will enjoy and watch. And I don't think we're particularly coddling parents. Like on the whole, I want my kids to work and pull their shit. But honestly, it's such a background thing now that, well, of course you're going to pick movies that the kids want to watch. That it's just kind of baked into the equation. It's just weird. It's a totally
Well,
different look.
yeah, I mean the economy for kids movies has grown so like exponentially since we were kids. Like when we were kids, like there was like
Yeah,
10 movies. It's like Benji.
that's
It's
true.
like there's not a lot
They're on
of like
CBS.
selection. But now it's
Like
like
TBS would play them forward and back.
Yeah.
Like you could watch all the Jaws movies and then you could watch them backward. And I say those like they're kids movies, but yeah, that was a kids movie when I was a kid.
yes, my son went through a Jaws phase, but he likes the worst movies in the franchise. Like he's always like Jaws 4, Home Alone 4. He's like into it. I'm like, why don't you like the original?
Man after my own taste.
Yeah,
Man after my own
what are you
taste. Like a
doing?
really B movie, like Mystery Science
He loves like
Theater
Michael Caine in
3000.
Jaws 4. I'm like, bro, what are you doing right now? Come on.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That's good. I'm glad your boy has good taste, and I'm glad that the
does.
love of B movies is transing. It's like my daughter and I watch Santa Claus Conquers the Martians once a year for Christmas. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have not
but
seen that.
whatever it is low budget. There's a man in a polar bear suit attacking some kids in the North Pole. There's Santa Claus is literally kidnapped by Martians and forced to make toys for the children of Mars. This is like the worst early 60s. Like the Martians are people in like onesie pajamas with green antennas on their heads. Like it's that good.
Nice.
Well worth your time
Solid.
if you want a terrible
Solid
Christmas
investment.
movie.
All right.
It's really good. But all right, so let's get back to self-reliance and accountability. So if we took the yin yang model that you were
Yeah.
just talking about, that you kind of spelled out super nicely there, and we broke that down into, all right, well, self-reliance, man. What's the positive and negative side? Like on the surface, like, well, it's all positive, right? Self-reliance is great, but what do you think? Is that the case?
Well, so the shadow side of self-reliance would be like, you want to just go everything alone. You're the like individualist to the point of like you're antisocial. And I think, I think humans, whether we're looking at like religious faith
I can see that.
traditions, stoicism, all over we are meant to be in relationship, with, the opposite sex, and then like with our communities, and like kind of be in that group together, like communally. So we have these two tensions, like individuality, self-reliance, and then like kind of the communal relational aspect, right, between our families and our kin groups. So those have to be kind of like in balance. And if we get too far into the self-reliance, then we're like the loner, kind of the lone wolf living by ourselves. Like you've got to kind of come back to the village a little bit and kind of be in relation.
Yeah, so if I picture what you're saying and I just apply it to, the work environment, I'd picture like the kind of micromanagey dude. He gets the information. So let's say we're going to get a mission brief, we're going to go plan, and then we're going to conduct this mission. There's people who are naturally pretty good at getting the information, delegating it down and saying, all right, man, let's break this up, the pieces up front. You got this, you got this, you got this. But there's a level of like trust and discomfort required to do that, right? And maybe that's like where you have to balance self-reliance. Maybe that's what you're talking about. Because really, integration of self into the community, self-reliance is like, I can't trust anybody else to do this. On the
Right.
positive side, I can do it all myself. I can do anything. But the negative side of it is I can't trust anybody else to do it. So I have to do everything. And man, that it's funny, just even as we describe it, that is so applicable in so many environments. Like that's not a military unique thing at all. Like I see
Right.
that all the time.
And
And
yeah.
yeah.
And I know like and some people like work better on projects alone. Like that's totally cool. Like I'm a huge introvert. I love being alone. I was just watching my uncle's place for him and I spent the night out there and I'm like, I love being out here alone. This is awesome. It's amazing. But like you got to balance it and like come back into the, the community and kind of like there's a time and place and you got to get it in different, if you don't get it in the workplace, you got to get it like kind of at, in your off duty hours, that kind of connecting to communities and like, and yes, to your point, like, trust is, I'm definitely like coming down on trust as like, it's this thing that, we've lost a lot of in the current climate. And it's like this secret
Yeah.
glue that like bonds humans together and it allows us to, create like amazing, architectural wonders or like just do a bunch of cool stuff together. If you don't have that trust, then you can't do that. You can't put it together.
That's 100% true, man. Trust and assuming positive intent. I think those are the two pieces of like I guess those are the two gluey substances that kind of make things work. Like when you see another person or you tell another person like, hey, can you do this for me? One, I trust that you can do it, either because you're a mechanic and you have the capability to do it, and I can trust that you'll do it right because I'm paying you and you've got certifications. Like I think certifications are supposed to like enhance trust a little bit,
Mm,
but also they assume positive intent. Like when that guy comes back to me and the mechanic's like, it's an extra part, it's going to cost an extra $400. It could be hard to say this person is probably trying to do the right thing. Like most of the time, most people I think want to do a good job. Most people are, you know, trying to be positive influences on the universe most of the time. I believe that. Now, does that leave you open to exploitation, right? Because that's the
yeah.
vulnerability associated, which is why I think you see that negative side of self-reliance, right? Which is I don't trust anybody to do it on myself because if I trust you, then there is a degree of vulnerability in that because you could screw me, right? And if
Yes.
you do, I'm the one that's ultimately accountable, right? Because we go back to that accountability that we talked. I'm the one that's going to be accountable for the kind of results of this, whether it's because it's my car and I drive it off the lot and it breaks down, or because the mission goes terribly, or any of the other analogies you want to use. But yeah, man, I think I think we're onto something with the positive and negative sides of self reliance. So we're really saying that self reliance at its best is the ability to go out by yourself and do a thing that you know you're capable of doing, and to have the confidence that you can do it, and then to have the broad kind of skill set and knowledge base as a person that can handle these situations. Like that's the good side of it. But the negative
Mhm.
side can be like I'm going off by myself to do a thing that perhaps I don't actually have the expertise or the capability to do, but I can't trust anybody else or kind of let go enough of the situation to give it out to delegate it to anybody else, and so I'm stuck with either a poor product or I'm stuck delivering something to the community or to my team or to my family that's substandard because I can't release that reliance, that self-control or that control over the situation enough to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
is that accurate?
And maybe that's the cliched, like asking for directions before we had smartphones. It was like, the
Oh
man's
man,
like, I don't want to ask for directions. I'm going to figure it out myself. And
that is the cliche.
and it's like,
Yes.
bro, just ask somebody for directions. So like
But tell me the truth, Adam. You totally haven't asked for directions sometimes, right?
so
You've driven an extra half hour
I
in
yeah.
circles
So
to
my
not ask for directions.
so my sense of direction is literally
Guilty.
the worst. Like it's the most embarrassing. Like it's like borderline like shameful. Like it's like I don't know if you remember Costanza in like Seinfeld. He did this bit where he's like, I'm just gonna do the opposite of whatever I think, and then he like has this great day.
Yes.
So that's how I am with like
Yes.
direction. I can't. It's like, oh, I think I should turn left here. Okay, turn right. And it's like I'll get to where I'm going faster. But yeah, definitely like I'm super stubborn. Um, I
That's awesome.
I think there's I think Zig Ziglar was the guy that had this quote like the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is trust them. I don't know if it's Zig Ziglar or not. It might be Taylor Swift. I'm not sure. But anyways, the important thing is the best way to find out is to trust them. And I think if we go through life like not trusting, we're gonna like exhaust ourselves. Like we have to at a certain point, like we have to trust that people have good faith, like you said. There is that like kind of the dark triad personalities of like narcissism, Machiavellianism,
Yep.
psychopathy. Like there are those people out there that are like gonna try to free ride and take advantage, but they are a minority. So like we need to just try to suss them out and then kind of avoid them. But most people are not like that.
No, it's not constructive to act as though a stranger is that way, right? It is not constructive in your life. Like I think we see this. I mean, this is a totally different show idea, but we're talk. I think the internet can make it can amplify, of course, anything negative. So you can look on the internet, you can see that, like, oh my gosh, you can easily convince yourself that the world is full of nothing but Machiavellian, narcissist, horrible people, and you can even go on like psychology.com and give them with clever diagnoses for all of them, so you know exactly what's wrong with everybody else in the universe. But then you start interacting with people that way, and it's completely unconstructive, right? I mean, one, they're going to react to you negatively too, but two, you're going to fall into this negative pole of self-reliance, which is I think I have to do everything myself because I can't trust anybody to do it. And you see people like that. I know people who will have a workman come to the house and will just follow the workman around and like
Right.
watch the workman the entire time. They're like, why did you sub this out? Why did you pay someone to do this for you?
Right.
And then follow them around in kind of a super like obviously mistrustful way, which is going to make that person probably do worse for you than they would do anyway.
Yeah.
Because if you treat me like a criminal, I might act like a criminal. It's a trap, right?
Mhm.
And the only way out of that trap is to what maybe Mr. Ziegler or Miss Swift said. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Zig Ziglar? Is that what you
Yeah.
said? I'm not familiar with him. That's
He,
an amazing name.
yeah, he's a dude from the 70s. I don't know a lot about him, but I definitely like he's a guy I want to like learn more about. But yeah,
I'm
so
also a dude from the 70s. Maybe we
we
know
got
each other.
dudes
There's
from
like,
the 70s. Yeah, and to your point about the internet, like the algorithms are going to like feed you, what you put eyeballs on, right? Like they're optimized for engagement. So like if you're watching videos or whatever it is about like, oh, these people X are just the worst people, it's going to start feeding you more of that same, oh, you like this? I'm going to feed you more of it.
yeah.
Whereas if we just go out in meet space, like MEAT space, and just like talk to other humans, we're like, okay, cool, like oh, we see things a little bit differently, but we're all still humans, like just trying to get through the day. Like, let's just, we can agree to disagree about certain things, but like, let's, it's not as bad, I guess, as it's portrayed virtually.
That again, it's a totally it could do 50 episodes on this, but isn't that so true? I mean, how many times have you gotten into like a doom scroll, like, oh gosh, I just what's wrong with the world? And then you go out and like sit and have a cup of coffee. Like my thing is every Tuesday and Thursday I go to my local diner and I sit in the morning and I do like my first 2 hours of work there. And I you just see the people in the community. And I probably don't agree with the people on, you know, 20% of the stuff around the margins. And if we really wanted to, we could probably get in like vicious arguments about the things we don't agree on. But the reality is, we mostly are pretty pleasant to each other. We mostly like, hey, what's up, man? How are you? And we can all go about our lives with different opinions, but kind of coexistence that very rarely comes into friction on any real issue. And it's just a refreshing look at like real world. Unplug from the digital, get out there and actually talk to people. Like, sure enough, most people are pretty decent most of the time. And if you treat them decently, sure enough, most people, there's kind of this reciprocity thing about humans. Like most people will treat you pretty well too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's that's just my thoughts on it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, a few months ago I shared like I think it was a Heineken commercial. It was like a beer commercial in England where they had two people put do an activity together. Like they just assembled like an IKEA furniture, right? And then they kind of showed like you know
That'll get your blood pressure up.
videotape things of them stating their political positions, right? And so they paired them with people that are like diametrically opposed to them politically. And then they're like, okay, you just heard what this person said. Like, do you want to have a beer with them? and then they like everybody just decides to just go have a beer after that because they had this shared experience of working together, like accomplishing a task together, and they're like, oh, you're just a person like
Hmm.
me, like let's chill and have a beer and like talk things out reasonably.
Well, it's funny, but I mean, honestly, I mean, obviously, we have some shared culture. We were both in the military. I get it. Although you're Navy and I'm Army, so we're less similar,
Mm,
perhaps,
mm,
than other people
mm.
might assume, right? There are differences there. But honestly, I met you at MPS. We got to know each other in person. I would never have known your political leanings, and you would probably never have known mine. But sure enough, they didn't come up
Mhm.
because, like, whatever, who cares? It's not really relevant. I enjoy talking to you. We have a lot of common interests. We like talking about things that we do that are similar and interests that we have. So I think a lot of it without the internet wouldn't even become a thing. Like I don't have to talk about that stuff with most people most of the time. It's not of interest. There's plenty of good things to talk about in the world, plenty of interesting things to talk about that don't cause friction at all. And again, we're way off topic, but it's interesting, right? It's interesting just to see how where reality and the internet kind of collide. And of course, this is not insightful. People know this shit. Everybody knows this.
Well, yeah, it's everybody is grappling with. We are we're in the midst of this huge revolution because of the internet and social media. It's completely upended normal ways of interacting, and then we have like institutions kind of decaying and collapsing. So that causes a big vacuum that everybody's dealing with in their own ways. And like how do we come to grips with this and like become humans like in this world?
So even as you say that, and as we have this conversation, it makes me want my brain is always trying to loop it back to self-reliance and accountability. But I see accountability tied into this. And here, just hear me. I don't know. This gives people shit. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But if I start typing a bunch of stuff on the internet, I start getting all excited about it, and I take a stance, and I start to identify myself as a red shirt or a blue shirt or whatever it is. Is there a degree? A huge part of accountability is kind of taking what you say and what you do and owning it. Is there a degree that just starts to like twist our brain around so that even when I get back into the real world and I'm not just like spamming stuff onto the internet,
Right.
I feel some obligation? Is this like kind of the negative side of accountability where you're like, no, I'm owning what I say? Like, man, sometimes I say dumb things, especially if I've been drinking, especially if I'm in like a family event and I've been drinking. I'm inclined to just talking off the cuff and saying really idiotic things.
Mm.
And you can just walk those back like, I'm an idiot. I should not have said that. But if you fall into the trap of like, I said it, I'm sticking with it, like
Yeah.
you can really walk yourself into trouble.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but like, yes, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote like The Anxious Generation, a bunch of stuff, like he quotes this Chinese thinker, Sen San, who says like the struggle for and against is the mind's like greatest disease. It's like something to that effect. So as soon as we take a position, we're going to be like irrationally attached to that position and like associate it with our self identity. And then we're going to want to protect that, and we want to justify ourselves to that position rather than like, owning up to it and say, oh, maybe I didn't have that totally right. But the other problem going on societally is, when you apologize, like there's no, like we've lost the concept of like grace,
Yeah.
you know,
Gracefulness.
there's
Yes,
no
that's
grace
right.
anymore. So it's like, if you own up to something and have a heartfelt apology, like it doesn't matter. So a lot of people make the calculation. They're like, fuck it. Like it doesn't matter. Like why should I apologize when nobody is
Double
gonna
down,
even care
triple
about
down,
my apology? Like
quadruple down.
so then they just double down. So that leads us so that like kind of the dynamics of social media and like these ideological ecosystems cause people to just double down.
That's so true, man. That is so absolutely true. And I'll be honest though, that is the exception in normal life. Like I have definitely been in bars or in team rooms where folks get into the double down game and it turns into like this pissing contest. But honestly, in most cases, well, less so in bar, in team rooms, it resolves the next day. Maybe the people, maybe they just get in a fight. Maybe they take it to the mats and just work it out. Maybe they go for a gym. Maybe they just get into a firefight together. They don't care anymore. But mostly, I find that stuff in real life smooths out.
Right.
Like in non-team room situations, it just kind of it's just water under the bridge. And in a couple of weeks, a couple of it can be longer for some of the things. Sometimes we get a little stuck in our positions, but most of the time that stuff kind of drifts out. And the times when it doesn't, those are the things that like stories and movies are written about, right? Like there's a reason that the Hatfields and McCoys are such an interesting kind of scene because like they just can't let this stuff go, right? And it's just stuck in this like blood feud, like this like Pashtun Wali kind of like you kill me, I kill you, eye for an eye thing that never ends. But that's remarkable, right? For most of us, you're like that's a crazy way to be. Why would you be
Right.
like that? This grace and forgiveness in interpersonal interaction is a lot more common, I think. Certainly than on the internet. The internet, it's impossible. You just have to, no, there will be none. There will be none.
No quarter will be given.
Never. And it's super just not constructive. And we all know it. And we always do it anyway. Because they're not real people, right? It's all just digits.
Yes. Yeah.
Except it is real people. And it actually is kind of destroying the world. So that's kind of a horrible thing. But I love that ties it back to accountability, because that's really the negative side, I think, of accountability, is getting stuck with actions that you don't actually even wish to own anymore, but you can't put them down. But the positive side of that is also really valuable. Like, if you do a thing, take responsibility, take ownership for the thing. I got a good story on this one. So it happened this week, and it's super relevant. So we had my wife's birthday's this week. I made a prime rib because she wanted a prime rib. So I made a prime rib. I slow cooked this guy all day. We had some mashed potatoes and asparagus with it. Now, one of the laws of a large family household is that everyone will never be happy with the meal. Like, that is, no matter what you make. You could make prime rib and mashed potatoes. Somebody's going to grouse. Anyway, so this time, it's my 14-year-old, right? So he's a fast eater. He's one of those kids that just inhales the food. Like, you say the prayer, you sit down, you eat, and like 25 seconds later, he's like, "Can I be excused?" Like, what the hell happened? Like, what, did you eat the food? Did you eject it? Did you take a suppository? Like, how did you get the food into yourself so fast?
Yeah.
The prime rib, though, was kicking his ass a little. He's chewing on it. He's working through it. It's steak, right? So you got to chew it. You can't just swallow it whole or you'll die. And he's like working through this prime rib. And in the middle of the meal, he's like, "Dad, this would be better if you could just make it into a smoothie. You just make it into a smoothie, and then I could just drink it, and then I'd be done." I was like, "Okay, you sure? I'll make you a smoothie from this in the morning. Do you want that? Are you sure that you want that?" And he looks at me, and he just looks. So we have that moment, like that Wild West, like just a look.
Yeah.
And he looks and he goes, "Yeah, Dad, I do. I want the smoothie."
Sticking
I'm
to
like,
his
"Okay."
guns.
And he's just sticking to him, like,
Yeah.
"Okay, we're going to stick to the guns." So I get up the next morning. I mix the prime rib and the mashed potatoes, a little bit of yogurt in there for liquid.
Nice.
Just hit blend, like, bzzz, right? And it generates this, like, cup of cream gravy-like material. I'm like, "There you go, bud. One smoothie."
Good morning.
And he looks at me, he's like, "I'm ready for it. Let's do this." And he just starts drinking it.
Yeah.
And he just looks at his face, and he's just drinking it. I'm like, "Let me have a taste of that. I want to experience this magic just to see." So I drink it. It is cream gravy. It tastes like drinking a 24-ounce cup of gravy. And I hand it back to him, like, "So what do you think? Is it good? You like it? Is this better than prime rib mashed potatoes?" He just looks again. We have that moment. He's like, "Yep." Finishes it, sets it down, and goes about his day.
Nice.
And I was inexplicably proud of this moment. Like, even though that's probably the negative pole, like, if we're being
owned it,
honest,
though.
but
Yeah.
he owned it. Just owned it. Didn't gripe, didn't complain, didn't
Nice.
bitch at me about it, didn't try to weasel out of it.
So
Hey,
we
man, you
we
put
have
your
an
foot in it.
expression in the SEAL teams. If you're wrong, stay wrong. I don't know if you have that in your community or not, but
No, it's not the same one, but is that what we're talking about?
yeah.
Is it
Well,
just
I
like
mean, it's
own the
like
mistake?
he's just like, all right, like I'm not a wallflower. I'm not gonna like just blow which way with the wind. I'm gonna
I'm like
see
a
through-
rock.
Yeah,
I'm gonna drink this
I'm
cup
gonna
of
see
gravy.
through this thing.
And I'm going to say it was better. Like, oh, it's funny because you need the positive side too, because there are times when actually that's what you have to do. Like, I mean, World War One's probably a terrible example, but I mean, you saw like this, like, just resolute grinding, like, we said we were going to do it and we're going to do it. Like, that's probably actually the really negative side. Like, actually, you should have noticed after the first 3 frontal assaults that it wasn't going to work and you probably need to do something different, but they didn't. They stuck by it. So I guess you give them their credit. They were very resolute. They, accepted the consequences of their decisions. Again, that's a terrible example because that was
Yeah.
a really poor outcome. But let's
Yeah.
think of another one
That's
where it's
that's
a positive
definitely
outcome.
like the shadow side of the masculinity, like that whole war.
100%.
Yeah.
That entire war does smack of just negative pole of masculinity. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Why are we just grinding it
That's
out and
just the
destroying all of us in the process?
That's the destructive side. Absolutely, absolutely.
What a nightmare.
All right. So what else? So let's kind of like summarize like what we've talked about so far.
Okay.
So we started out talking about, we're trying to like explore this further. What we're talking about when we talk about masculinity. Self-reliance, accountability. Serving. Serving your group. whether it's women and children, or your larger group, you're being of service to the group. You're like adding value to them somehow. Um,
Hmm.
in general, we're interested in things over relationships, although there's like plenty of exceptions to that. And then we talked about the yin yang. We talked about the differences between the two, and kind of this. It's a fluid interaction back and forth, and it's kind of the complementarity of like the opposites that actually like makes the harmonious whole together.
Yeah, right. And then I think we tried to start sussing out like the very first, because really that was like just wrapping it up with a nice bow. What we were trying to describe last week, just crudely, we're like going everywhere with it. But I think that put a nice bow on what we were really trying to get after, and then really started unpacking. I guess you could say the first piece of masculinity. We're like, okay, accountability, self-reliance. Like this is the first kind of facet. I think we covered, the positive and the negatives. We looked at like what can it be at its best, what can it be at its worst, where can self-reliance lead you it's not where you want to be. And then where can self-reliance kind of get you? That's a really positive thing. Like what is the best side of that? Because again, that's the whole purpose of what we're doing, right? Is really trying to understand like how to be the best that we can be. And if we take the best lessons of self-reliance and the best lessons from accountability, and we distance ourselves from the World War Ones or the will not stop for directions moments of the universe, then we can be better people. And I guess yeah, I feel like we covered some good ground. I guess I look forward to seeing kind of where we're gonna go next week with it.